This show is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. The content on this show is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such condition.
This is Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton, exploring the science of functional medicine and the power of healing from within. Breathe in, breathe out. And now your host, Dr. Beth Claxton.
Good morning. This is Dr. Beth Claxton. You're tuned into Rooted in Healing. And today we have with us a guest named Margaret Christensen. She's a medical doctor in the Dallas area. And I met Margaret because she was one of my functional medicine teachers. She taught in the hormone module. And since then, I have expanded my fund of knowledge, and I've met David Rosensweet, and he is featured in episode 11 of Rooted in Healing. So you can tune into that and listen to our conversation. When we talk about hormones, many people think women talking about hormones, it's about women. And Margaret and I are both trained obstetrician gynecologists. So I wanted to say, if you're a man, a dude, listening to this show, this applies to you too, because you have hormones as well. We're talking about hormones. We're not saying female hormones, because all hormones are affected when we start to talk about environmental circumstances. So Margaret is incredibly knowledgeable. She came to the understanding of hormones and hormone disruption through her own painful journey of mold illness, otherwise known as mycotoxin illness, because it's really not the mold that makes us sick. It's the toxin that the mold releases that makes us sick. So mycotoxin illness, she had autoimmunity and fibromyalgia and chronic pain, so many things, depression. And she has 2 children affected by toxins as well in their journey. And it's a very interesting interview, and I think it's worth listening to, because I've probably for the first time understood the simplicity of the whole situation with toxins, fat, cell membrane, mitochondrial membrane, and how they disrupt our hormonal system. We also start to talk about the brain and places in the brain where specific toxins can start to be disruptive to brain function and cause the brain to get its wires crossed. So crazy, so interesting. Then Margaret's going to tell us some really helpful, very simple ways to help dig our way out of this hole of toxins. And we also did talk with Robert Roundtree, again, another Institute for Functional Medicine lecturer recently. And he talks about toxins as well. I don't want to talk just about toxins. I want to highlight the fact that they are important. It's important to pay attention to what is around you, what you're putting on your skin, what's going into your body, what's coming into your lungs, what you're bathing in, what your feet are walking in when you're outside, all of it, because we are slowly being bombarded by these toxins, and there are ways to avoid them if we can stay awake and not be too afraid to face the music. We will be back in a few minutes to talk to Margaret, and go fill up your coffee, and we will talk to you right after these messages on Rooted in Healing.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
This is Dr. Beth, and today we have with us Margaret Christensen. She is an Institute for Functional Medicine faculty member for the past 20 years and has been a certified functional medicine health coach as well. Dr. Christensen first became interested in functional medicine over 20 years ago when she was trying to solve the riddle of her and her family's complex health challenges. Unbeknownst to her at the time were consequences of severe toxic mold exposure. She became intimately familiar with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmunity, hormonal, neurological, psychiatric consequences of unrecognized biotoxin illness. A board-certified OBGYN for 23 years, her initial boutique functional medicine practice has now grown to the Carpathia Collaborative, a large multidisciplinary functional medicine practice based in Dallas, Texas, covering a full spectrum of complex and chronic disease. She's hosted the immensely popular Toxic Mold Summit and more recently Hormonal Havoc, the COVID fallout and how to fix it, sharing her expertise at the intersection of environmental toxins, hormones, and overall health. In addition, she has also completed training with the Integrative Psychiatric Institute on the use of ketamine and psychedelics to address PTSD, treatment-resistant depression, and end-of-life issues. Dr. Christensen is passionate about educating her clients and colleagues about root cause, whole systems medicine. Welcome, Dr. Christensen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Beth. Yeah.
So nice to have you on. So your background is so diverse, and we have a common thread of starting off with OBGYN. Mm-hmm. And before we started recording, we were talking about the changes that we can make by using functional medicine. I'd like to touch into those just a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. What did you start seeing or noticing in your OBGYN practice as functional medicine was coming into your life?
Well, I mean, it was amazing just understanding that by changing diet, adding nutrients, using natural progesterone, for example, and DHEA, oh my God, I could turn all these women around without using birth control, without having to do surgeries, mm-hmm. and, without having to use all these medications that, I had been taught, the drug it out, cut it out method. Mm-hmm. And it was just so powerful. And of course, I started with myself because I got sick and I couldn't get better with how I was trained, and went to see all my, wonderful, compassionate colleagues. And they were like, oh, here's an antidepressant, here's some pain medicine, for your severe fibromyalgia you're having, and nothing was working. And that's how I ended up falling into functional medicine. Mm-hmm. And when I started on myself, and I was like, wow, I've had IBS symptoms now for 15 years and they went away. I was like, what else can I do? And that's how it was just amazing and such a powerful tool.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on your story at all anymore? What was going on with your family?
Yeah. So I had, here I was 10 years into practice as an OBGYN, 16 years of training and, total of, up to that point, with including those 10 years. And I had 4 babies of my own, so I'm up for 16 years of sleep deprivation, mm-hmm. and then all these exposure to chemicals in the hospitals that I didn't know about. I had made it. We moved into this fancy house in Dallas on a fancy street, and and then I started getting really exhausted. I was severe fibromyalgia, severe chronic fatigue. I could never catch up on my sleep. My whole body hurt. My gut was a mess, and I got so bad that I had to actually close my practice. I had to step back because I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And in the meantime, my kids were all sick too. And my husband was acting weird. But it took 8 years to figure out. And by the time I fell into functional medicine and started turning myself around to figure out, oh gosh, this house had a terrible toxic mold issue in its crawl space that was blowing all around the house. So that's how I got started in this arena. And I ended up seeing one of the original greats, Dr. Bill Ray in Dallas, Texas at the Environmental Health Center. And, started learning about toxic mold. And because I had gotten sick and had closed my practice, and finally 2 years later, I had to go back to work. I was the primary breadwinner. I worked in a compounding pharmacist who I had learned about through one of my clients. I didn't know anything about bioidentical hormones. He said, Margaret, here we have a little office in the back of our pharmacy. If you want to, come here, you can set up here. And he's the one who really started teaching me about bioidentical hormones. And at the same time, I'm learning all the nutritional components, the gut components, et cetera. And he took me to my first functional medicine lecture with Dr. Jeffrey Bland, and I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, this is the first real medicine I've learned since the first 2 years in medical school. Mm-hmm. That's not all contaminated with pharma. So that's kind of how I got into this. And then as things went along and my children got older and became I realized that my two youngest were having real challenges, neuropsychiatric illnesses, and my former husband also developed severe Parkinson's. So that's how I really learned it. And the environmental toxic side of things, not just toxic mold, but all the petrochemicals we're being exposed to, what's in our food and what's in our water, what's in our medications, and particularly, what's in our vaccines. And I completely did a 180 on understanding that half the stuff that we were taught in medical school was complete BS dogma. So that's my story.
Wow.
And then I started training and teaching and teaching. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were one of my lecturers when I did my functional medicine training. So tell us a little bit more. What are biotoxins? I think this word is getting out in the news. Yeah.
So a biotoxin is a very tiny fat-soluble toxin that's stuck inside the fatty layers of our cell membranes and or our mitochondrial membranes. And our mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. So biotoxins can be heavy metals, plastics, pesticides, petrochemicals, viral particles, mycotoxins, and things like spike protein. So these are small, teeny tiny particles that get inside that fatty layer within our cell membranes and disrupt its function, or they get inside the fatty layer of the mitochondrial membranes and disrupt its function. So you go from having a nice olive oil type of layer in your cell membranes where, let's think about this, you have all these receptors that sit in your cell membranes, and your receptors are kind of like on the cell or like your eyes and your ears and your nose and your mouth, on your body. The receptors are picking up signals from elsewhere in the body or from, hormones or from neurotransmitters. And so if those cell receptors are sitting in a cell membrane that has now gone from olive oil to a bunch of chunks of lard in there because there's toxins stuck in that cell membrane, then they stop functioning correctly. And subsequently, we start seeing all kinds of disruption in things like insulin resistance, again, neurotransmitter malfunction. So you start feeling anxious, depressed, etc. And of course, then our hormones are not correctly signaling the cells in the way they need to. And then you start seeing all kinds of disruption in hormonal function in the body. And that's really kind of where my area of expertise is understanding how do all these different biotoxins end up impacting our hormonal systems and the neuropsychiatric system.
Amazing. I've never heard anyone explain it quite like that, and it's super helpful to have that visual.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the insulin resistance and, more specifically weight? Everybody's wanting to lose weight these days, and it seems like it's a problem of this century, really.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I would say that the three top causes of, weight, abnormal weight gain and resistance to weight loss. Number one would be environmental biotoxins. Again, what's in our food, what's in our air, what's in our water supply. People have no idea and no idea how corrupt our food supply is. and how that's disrupting things, and things like high fructose corn syrup and genetic modification and the amount of Roundup or glyphosate that is in our food supply, which is 95% of our foods are genetically modified. So you have all these biotoxins that then impact things like insulin function and build up in the cells, and the body is trying to protect us. So it stores away these toxins inside fat. So that is that's one way that happens. The other way is that the biotoxins themselves are signaling our brain or the part of the brain that's called the hypothalamus, and acting as if they are hormones, many of them. And again, so that is part of how things get screwed up. So you have biotoxins as a major component. And so a lot of people gain weight because the body's actually trying to protect them and store away and trying to keep those out of your circulation and keep those out of your organs, and they'll put them in fat. And where do we have fat? Well, we have fat in our breasts and our brains. Mm-hmm. So we wonder why we're seeing problems there. So biotoxins is a huge component. And then disrupted cortisol, so high levels of stress and high levels of cortisol over time. Again, cortisol signals the body to store fat. So if you're under constant stress, whether that is emotional stress, physiological stress, nutritional stresses, inflammation in the body, whatever it is, and you're constantly signaling cortisol and you don't ever have time for recovery, then again, the body is signaling you to store fat for the long run, because that, we used to make high levels of cortisol when we had to trek across, 20 miles a day as hunter-gatherers, right? And to store fat for the winter. So our body is naturally made to signal that when we're under stress. Now, then you do have those, those folks and those women who will lose weight when they're under stress, and they're more adrenaline dominant than cortisol. So that's a big piece. And then again, the whole, cortisol as just one piece of the whole other hormonal dance of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, insulin, thyroid. And the thyroid also is our body's most sensitive gland from an environmental standpoint. It's the first thing to go. And I don't know, at least 75% of the women I see, and probably 50% of the men, have thyroid hormone dysfunction. So those are the reasons that we are seeing this abnormal weight gain, and it all ties back to our very high stress levels and the very high toxic burden that we have because of the food, air, and water supply. That is that we have. There's such complete corruption in our government, in both parties, in terms of regulating any of that. And that this is where people need to become knowledgeable and start taking care of themselves. Eating organic, clean water, clean food, clean air, and a clear mind. Those are the things. Those are my big things that I tell everybody.
I like that. So you were talking about storage and fat. Is this what cellulite comes from? Yeah, I mean, I guess so. It's cellulite. Yeah, it's just fat that's got a lot of connective tissue in there, and that gives you that bumpy look. Mm-hmm. But again, yeah. So I could say yes. I mean, that we are seeing a lot of, again, toxins being stored in fat and excess of fat produced, mm-hmm. and then that is why. That's one of the reasons that we can see that. And the big problem with even, taking things like GLP-1s, which Dr. Gail Clayton, I know she's mm-hmm. also been a guest here. Mm-hmm. We've done a whole thing on, for anybody who loses weight rapidly and does not support their detoxification mechanisms in their body, in their livers, in their gut, in their, bowel movements, with sweating, the skin, with their lymphatics. If you're not supporting that, and you're not supporting it down to a cellular level, the body's ability to get rid of those toxins, then what happens is you start losing all this weight, all this fat, and you mobilize all those fat-soluble toxins, and they just recirculate in the body. And where do they go? Up to your brain, into your, breasts and your hips. And you end up putting the weight right back on and then feel worse afterwards. Because there are extra toxins circulating, right?
Yeah.
And I ask because in Ayurveda, mm-hmm. the cellulite is said to be toxic, toxins. And
interesting.
So I'm trying to put together these puzzle pieces, like, how is that? But it does make sense if you think of that as the fat where the toxins are stored. Yeah. So beautiful. So can you talk a little bit more about what to do with our environment, what we can do? Because this is all sounding pretty scary.
Yes, it does. It does. And I think, again, we have to have deep compassion with ourselves and, forgiveness for what we haven't known in the past, and including the physicians. And you and I were talking before we started recording that, doctors, MDs in this country are taught zero about the environment and really zero about nutrition. But we can all learn these things. And so my basics that I tell everybody in any podcast that I'm on or in any, summit I've done or whatever, you'll hear me say, clean food, clean air, clean water, and a clear mind. So by clean food, I'm talking about an anti-inflammatory, real food diet, organic foods, as much as you can do, organic, and pasture-raised animals if you're eating meat. And then, non-processed, very little chemicals in it, very little sugar. And also, what we benefit from is very little grains. And we can come around to why very little grains. And then, secondly, I would say clean water. Again, having a water filter of some sort in your house. I have a whole house filter. I have one under my sink, and I have one on top of my sink. So when I use, I try and use as clean as water as I can because our water supply is so compromised. Because again, you have all these people, peeing and pooping and flushing into the water supply, and then theoretically it goes to a clean water plant. But all the Viagra is still in there, all of the Lipitor, all the neuropsychiatric meds. I mean, the amount of chemicals that are still in our water that we have is challenging. So drinking, filtered water is very helpful. You've got to drink out of glass or steel, and because of all the plastics and the BPAs and et cetera. So, and you have to drink lots and lots of water. And not just water, but water with electrolytes in it, and ideally some liquid minerals, or you can take minerals separately because, again, our body's massively depleted of electrolytes and minerals and fluids. So if you have lots of nice, clean water going through that, you've got electrolytes, our body's neurological systems and all of our cells communicate with an electrical system, and we have to have those minerals available in order for many of the things to function. So if we are drinking nice quantities of water with electrolytes and minerals that is clean, you're flushing your kidneys, you're flushing your liver, you're helping to flush your skin, you're helping to really flush your body.
Yeah.
So,
and Dr. Clayton talks about it. It was so interesting to hear her talk on your last webinar. She's like, I think people were asking, how do you know when you need water, and how do you know when you need water with electrolytes? And if we're tuned into the taste and what our body needs, there's a time when you drink water and it's like you need something else.
Right.
Yeah. Another time when you're thirsty and you really just want water. So learning to identify that, your body can tell you when electrolytes would be important.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, if you're doing any kind of detoxification protocols at all, then it's really important to stay hydrated with some extra electrolytes, because that will help to get to flush those toxins through the kidneys without being so as toxic. But you're absolutely right, and Dr. Gale talks about too that a lot of times we will feel hungry, not because we want food, but because our body is missing those electrolytes and minerals. And so when you start replenishing those, that can really help with the satiety piece.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And a lot of times we aren't hungry. We just want water, and then water with electrolytes, or a good healthy pinch of like gray sea salt.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Some sea, a little sea salt in the water can be very useful. So that's the clean water piece. Yes. And then the clear air, the clean air piece is, again, understanding that, our air is just, full of all kinds of stuff. again, petrochemical byproducts that we've been pouring in. So having a quality HEPA air filter particularly where you sleep and also where you work, can be very useful, because the lungs, when we're breathing in stuff, the lungs have a huge amount and a huge area where we have immune cells. And so when we're breathing that in, and also in our sinuses and our nasal passages, stuff gets stuck in there. So if having clean air, and the other thing that I tell people to do all the time is to do sinus rinsing. And had we had people do sinus rinsing at the beginning of COVID, which is one of the things that they did, like in Japan and other places, and one of the things that we recommended, that's like taking a shower inside your nose. You're washing out viral particles, you're washing out dust particles, you're washing out allergens. And so that's a simple way to do it. And, for example, if you have a history of recurrent sinus infections and you've been on a lot of antibiotics, you've created a biofilm of mucus in there all the time. And so doing some sinus rinsing on a regular basis and using, I use biocidin, but you can also use colloidal silver. There's other things that you can put it into the saline rinse. You can help to break down those biofilms and prevent this mucus goo snot from holding on to a lot of allergens and a lot of immune stimulating factors, and it'll keep you from getting colds and sick. So having clean filtered air, doing some sinus rinsing, and then stop using plug-ins, Febreze, all these horrible, awful fake scented stuff. And again, this is another way we are being manipulated, is through smells. And smells directly affect our limbic system and our brain. And the limbic system has the hypothalamus as part of it, which controls all your hormonal systems and your moods and your sleep-wake cycles. So getting rid of all the fake smells, the laundry detergents, the fake perfumes, all that. If you want smells, use essential oils. So that's all part of the clean air piece.
Yeah,
and people have no...
Go ahead. I'd love to talk a little bit more about biofilms.
Mm-hmm.
Can we dig into that a little bit so people understand them? What is this concept of biofilms?
So, a biofilm is kind of like pond scum or plaque on your teeth. That's a biofilm. So we have a normal mucus layer that's produced in our sinuses and as well as through our entire gastrointestinal tract, as well as in the vagina, in the bladder. So a biofilm is this mucus layer that is supposed to be produced by our cells along with normal healthy bacteria. And it provides a protective layer or coating. However, over time, recurrent infections of any kind, you start building up this abnormal, thick, snotty biofilm mucus layer that then starts trapping, again, all kinds of particulate matter, any kind of toxins, dust, fires. I mean, I know that you all have had fires in Arizona. So you have this layer that traps there and the bacteria that are living there. And so for people with chronic sinus infections or ladies with chronic bladder infections, you have bacteria that are kind of just sitting there trapped in that layer that are just kind of just smoldering along. And there's, that may not be bothering you, but then something comes along, a big event, or you get really upset about something, or, you started crying, or again, you get a little minor cold, and all of a sudden what's been hiding in the biofilm just becomes very active and starts to bloom. And then you get your sinuses, you get a real sinus infection again, or your bladder infection comes back. And this is where a lot of mycotoxins live. And so mycotoxins are the toxins produced by molds. And toxic mold is also very different. And maybe Dr. Gale talked about that than like outdoor molds. And so you get all these toxins trapped in this biofilm that's creating this chronic layer of irritation. And particularly if it's in your sinuses, you have your frontal sinus, which is at the top of your forehead. That's directly packed right up against your brain. And then you have your maxillary sinuses, which underneath your eyes and right above your teeth. Again, those tend to get really full all the time. These biofilm, chronic sinus infections that you can get fungal balls in there. So you have to use some biofilm busters in order to help break things down. Colloidal silver is one of them. Again, a lot of the herbs that are in the biocidin drops help to break up biofilm. You have biofilms that can develop in the gut for people who have, again, chronic IBS, leaky gut syndrome, et cetera. You want to, and those hide parasites. So there are techniques and ways that we can help to break down those biofilms so that we stop having these recurrent cycles of infections.
Yeah. I like to use the analogy of Jell-O with fruit in it.
Yes. There you go.
And then
that's exactly right.
The antibiotics cannot penetrate the Jell-O, but that fruit can, or the bacteria that is symbolized by the fruit can still grow, and grows just right above that layer of the Jell-O, and then you get a UTI, and then that's why you just keep having to women have to keep taking antibiotics. And I see it a lot in women who become sexually active again. Maybe they've been on hormone replacement and they start to have normal, healthy skin in their vagina, and they feel well enough to have sex again, then they get the urinary tract infection. So, yes, thank you. Yeah.
Right, and then they get a urinary tract infection for which they give antibiotics, and antibiotics causes yeast and fungal overgrowth. The yeast and fungal overgrowth produces its own mucus layer of biotoxins,
right.
and then you're more likely to get an infection again. So you get this chronic cycle. So we have to break up those biofilms and treat for fungus as well as bacteria when we see recurrent infections.
Exactly. Thanks for going into that. Okay, so clear air. And
that was clear air, we talked about clear water, clean food, and then a clear mind. Understanding that learning how to recognize when our limbic system is in complete overdrive, and what in Dr. Talk we call that sympathetic overdrive, where we're in fight or flight all the time. And this is where anxiety, depression, irritability, comes from. And so meditation, prayer, centering, breath work, movement, these are all things that can help us get out of our heads and into our hearts. Understanding that we are being manipulated through social media, through mainstream media, et cetera, to stay in fear all of the time. Any commercial you see, and of course, if you're watching anything on mainstream, it's all brought to you by pharma, brought to you by Pfizer, and it's all scary stuff. So the more fear we are in, the more anxiety we're in, and then you have, your whatever your life is on top of that. I mean, I just look at my own life, taking care of, and particularly my son who is so severely mentally ill, and being in fight or flight all the time. So our brains get stuck. The part of our brain called the limbic system, which has the hypothalamus. That's the part that regulates in our entire hormonal system. It regulates your sleep-wake cycles. It regulates your gut motility. It regulates, all of your organ functions. You have the hypothalamus as part of the limbic system. You have the amygdala as part of the limbic system. That's the part of the brain that's constantly scanning your environment for when's that tiger going to jump out at me?
Right.
And that's what the amygdala is, what sends the signal down to the adrenal glands to say run or fight, make some adrenaline, make some cortisol. And then you have your hippocampus, and the hippocampus is the memory center of the brain. And we tend to store challenging memories, scary memories, fearful things much more easily than we do all the good, happy things. So all of this is running unconsciously in the brain. That's the limbic system. This is what's running us all the time.
Right.
And so if you are in fear all the time, then then you can't lose weight, you can't recover, you can't think. So learning how to clear your mind and drop into your heart and, all the things that you and I talked about before we got on.
Yeah. And I'd love to do just a little anatomy with people. So the amygdala sits right by the hippocampus. The hippocampus is very close to the receptors, the smell receptors. Yes. And that's why smells trigger such distinct memories. And I think that's fascinating. And I'm wondering, could you help calm your limbic system by having calming smells? Probably so.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, Beth, because this is one of the things that I talk about all the time in terms of, how do biotoxins disrupt hormones? Well, one of the huge ways is if you are smelling, if you are breathing in, air that is poor quality, that has mycotoxins in it, it's got a lot of particulates in it, it's got pesticides in it, et cetera. You're breathing in, and your olfactory nerve, that's your smelling nerve, is one of the shortest nerves in the body, but it goes right to the back of the top of the sinuses, right back into the limbic part of the brain. So right back into the hippocampus, into the limbic system, and into the hypothalamus. So if your sinuses are chronically inflamed and irritated all the time, you're sending the signal back into the limbic system to stay irritated all of the time. You can use smells, like exactly as you say, but you want to use essential oils.
Right.
You want, things like lavender, like frankincense, to help. Absolutely, can totally calm the system. Mm-hmm. And people who are, chemically sensitive, so we'll see this all the time. And anybody who's gotten, who's been sick for a long time, can develop multiple chemical sensitivity, and particularly people who've had mold toxicities. So, you walk down the aisle of the grocery store that has all the detergents and stuff in it and all the smells, and you get these terrible headaches. I used to walk into Bed Bath & Beyond, and, where there's a lot of stores now that spray smells.
Yes.
And you get these terrible headaches or feel nauseated. I have to tell you, I educate every Uber driver and, Lyft driver that I'm in, because they've always got some god-awful plug-in. But so absolutely you can use good smells to help calm the limbic system. Or do you have some favorites?
Oh, yeah. I have some rose oil that I bought in Egypt.
Oh, rose. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And lavender is really nice and calming. And there's one called vetiver that I love to use on my feet at night. It's made from grass roots.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Vetiver is a lovely one. And frankincense has very powerful neurological anti-inflammatory properties. And, so if you want an example of, I have like I mentioned, my son who's almost 33 years old and has been severely schizophrenic, and he's somewhere on the autism spectrum, and he's had traumatic brain injuries, and, it's been a horrible journey. But here he is at 6'5" and, 220 pounds, having a rage episode, like 6 inches in front of me.
Yeah.
I would sprinkle some lavender and frankincense in his palms and have him rub them and just hold it up to his nose. And it would be amazing. Within 5 minutes, I could help him calm down. So absolutely, we can use smells to calm our brain, but be very aware how smells are being used to irritate our brains all the time, and we're not even aware of it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. You wanted to speak about grains, and before we run out of time, I'd love to hear what you have to say about grains. Yeah. So the challenge with all of the wheat grown in this country and 95% of the corn, et cetera, is that it's the corn itself is actually genetically modified, and that means that we've taken a piece of gene from a virus, spliced it to a piece of gene from a bacteria, and spliced it into a plant to keep the plant from dying, to keep the corn from dying, or the soy from dying, or whatever the beet, whatever it is, been genetically modified, to keep it from dying when it's sprayed with Roundup. So all the weeds die, the corn keeps growing, and then the corn is turned into food. It's now covered in Roundup. Although wheat itself in this country has not been genetically modified in that same way, it has been changed to have much higher density of gluten in it than what you see in Europe. And then it's sprayed right before it's harvested with Roundup, with glyphosate, which to help desiccate it or dry it out. And then it's all turned into our food. And glyphosate is a massive hormone disruptor, neurological disruptor, kills all the good bacteria in our guts, and again creates so much disruption in so many ways. And those of us who are in functional medicine understand that everything is in the gut. And so when the foods that we're eating, and particularly these grains that then are highly processed, immediately turn into sugar, and then have this bizarre genetics in them, and now they're covered with this
this massively hormonal disrupting, neurologically disrupting, and immune disrupting pesticide, that's the problem. And that's another reason that we see the obesity that we're seeing, the obesity in children. If you put high fructose corn syrup together with genetic modification and the toxins coming in vaccines in the ridiculous vaccine schedule, that is why we are seeing all the chronic illnesses that we are seeing. So those are the things that that's usually why grains can be problematic. Rice, rice has arsenic in it. Rice is probably better if you're going to do any of these, if you're going to, eat something. But for a lot of people, they feel a whole lot better when they're on a paleo type diet, which is, just meat and vegetables and lots of good fats.
Right. And some natural starches like potatoes or sweet potatoes or squashes.
Yeah. Natural starches. Right.
And I think what's really sad to realize is when we go out to eat, unless it's advertised as organic, it's not organic. The gluten, the flour, unless it's advertised, is glutinous treated flour. And we're just trying to take some time off and do something nice for ourselves by going out to dinner.
Yeah. So, and this is where we can get into the energy of the food that we're consuming. And you know what? You can bless everything, and you can just always say grace before you eat anyway. Number one, it gets you present, and it slows down, your brain and actually sends signals to your gastrointestinal tract. Hey, be ready to receive here. But you can, kind of energetically just bless your food and just say, hey, I'm just going to receive what works for me. And I don't want to, I don't want the excess toxins, but just bless it. Enjoy the time that you're having out, but don't do it too much. Because then there's the other problem with seed oils that we're talking about. And there's a really great book called Good Energy by Casey and Callie Means that really talks about, again, what's happened to our food supply and how it became so corrupt between high fructose corn syrup, the seed oils, and the grains that are all contaminated and highly processed, and everything, all the nutrients stripped out. So,
say a little bit more about seed oils. Because I know that some people have heard about them, some people haven't.
Okay, yeah. So we're talking about, basically all the cooking, the quote vegetable oils, sunflower seed, safflower seed, canola, peanut oils. All of these, again, all of them are coming from genetically modified sources. They're all have pesticides in them, but these oils are. That we were told, these are so much healthier for you than animal fats. Well, that's not true because they are processed at very high temperatures, and that creates all kinds of abnormal bonds in these fats. And remember, all of our cell membranes are made up of good fats. Our brain has good fats in it, right? And myelin, which is what puts is the insulating sheath around all of our neurons, are made of good fats. So if you are eating these highly toxic fats that have all these aberrant double bonds in them that are highly inflammatory, again, this is problematic, and this is where we need to go to things like coconut oil or avocado oil if you're cooking at higher temperatures. But at lower temperature, and ghee which ghee is clarified butter. That's good. Again, clarified organic butter. You want butter has, again, lots of toxins in it because it's fat. So you want, grass fed. So that is, these seed oils are what mostly everybody's cooking with and what's in all of the packaged foods that we have. And they're highly inflammatory in the body. And part, again, the whole weight gain thing, part of the insulin disruption, et cetera, as is high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, exactly. And another way to help with the seed oils, they're omega-6s. They tend to be, and we can take some good high quality omega-3 oils, and that can help at least balance out some of the inflammatory effects.
And omega, that's right. These are these aberrant omega-6s and omega-9s. The body needs omega-6s, but it needs the omega-6s that haven't been highly processed. Mm-hmm. So raw sunflower seeds, raw seeds of any kind are fabulous, and cold pressed oils are great. And I learned a whole lot from Dr. Patricia Kane I've done her course 3 times on, lipid membrane exchange and understanding how our body needs these good fats, and that you can't get it from these highly processed cooking oils.
Right. So would you say that a bottle of avocado oil that you buy at the store, if it says organic, would be okay?
Yeah. Something, okay. Who knows? I mean, everything is probably compromised in some way, but at least it's better. So avocado oil, ghee,
Yes.
Coconut oil, you can cook it with pretty high heat. And, I'm not worried about organic coconut oil. Coconut is kind of hard to, things that have a shell around it, or really thick skin aren't going to be as contaminated with pesticides as something that has very thin skin like an apple or, strawberries.
Exactly.
So avocado oil, is good.
Good. Margaret, thank you for your time. You're a wealth of information, all these trainings and so much wisdom. And we'll have to have you back to talk more
Thank
about
you. Love to come back.
Some other lovely things. Yeah. So Thanks again. And you've been listening to Rooted in Healing, and it's on 106.5 FM, Mellow Mountain Radio, 780 AM. And we're on Saturday mornings at 9. We'll be right back.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
Welcome back to Rooted in Healing. We have had our discussion with Dr. Margaret Christensen this morning. Very knowledgeable, very well trained and educated woman who really does not want to leave any stone unturned. She continually searches for the answers to get to the bottom of things. I think that's why she went into functional medicine. That's what we do. We just don't take any answer. We want to dig to the bottom, keep digging to the bottom and find that root cause. So our discussion today was really about toxins and hormones and how toxins can disrupt hormones and what to do about that. And as we mentioned in the interview, Margaret and I are both obstetrician gynecologists. And again, I want to say, if you're a guy, this applies to you too, because men have hormones. Actually, men have estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, and progesterone, just like women do. It's just that their testosterone, estrogen ratios are different, and men have more receptors for testosterone than women do on certain places in the body. So that's how simple it is. So yes, all of this applies to all of us, and especially your children, your babies. Everyone's hormones are always working. It's what we call in functional medicine communication. They travel through the blood. They get the cells talking to each other, and the cells talk to each other through their motherboards or their cell membranes, which are fat, which is why it's so important to eat high-quality fats and not eat the seed oils in the processed food. Make sure that the fats that you are putting inside your body are organic sourced, not fried or processed in a way that's going to damage them. This leads to a process called oxidative stress, which is inflammatory in the body. And as we know, almost everything can root down into inflammation if we follow it all the way down. Margaret gives some really nice things to do at home: clean food, clean water, clean air, clear mind. And I'd like to add, with the clear mind, the thoughts that you think can be toxic as well. The thoughts, the trauma, anything that's going through the mind causes our limbic system, our reptilian brain to fire in an abnormal pattern. So even being Pollyanna and finding the good in everything is actually really healthy for the brain. Try it out. See if it helps your mood. I think you'll be surprised. And our next interview is going to be with Deb Lash. She is a local to Northern Arizona. And a little bit about Deb is she had back surgery scheduled. She had chronic pain. She's a yoga teacher. She's been a yoga colleague of mine for a long time. And she had back surgery scheduled. And she discovered what's called foundations yoga. She learned this, practiced this, and called Friday afternoon before her Monday morning surgery and canceled. And what's also interesting is that her husband had back surgery. He still is doing foundations yoga since they discovered it after his back surgery and is finding a lot of healing and stability in that. So I'm really excited to talk to Deb and tune in next time to hear her. Until then, this is Rooted in Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Beth Claxton. You're listening to KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM. And my wish for you is to find that which makes you feel absolutely vibrant inside and out and follow that.